Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So again, I want to thank you all for joining our session today, and I'm really excited to introduce you to today's presenters. So our first presenter is Tony Zanger, and he is a senior director at GP Strategies. With over 32 years of experience, Tony has consistently been a top performer in sales across various organizations and industries. He combines sales fundamentals, data-driven insight, and commitment to excellence to empower sales professionals to reach their full potential. So thank you for joining us today, Tony. And we also have Ken Valla. He is the president of the Valla Group, a sales effectiveness firm with 30 years of experience in sales, sales management, sales strategy consulting. And Ken has been published on Amazon bestselling book, Conversational Selling, 7 Sales Conversations That Drive High Performance. Also to let you know that Ken's firm, the Valla Group, is a widely recognized as a modern day sales training company using research-based proprietary content and an innovative, scalable approach to learning. So again, I want to welcome you, Ken. So before we give it over to you, gentlemen, I just want to go over today's agenda really quick. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us.
Nice to be
So
here.
what we're going to talk about, what can you expect from this little conversation today? So we're going to talk about current selling research, and we're going to talk about why sales training programs are falling short, and a new way for sales training, as well as what else we need to consider. So again, welcome. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ken and Tony.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from around the world. I want to start first by just looking at the current selling research. Like, what is the market saying about selling practices today and what it means? And what you are looking at right here on this slide is just some data and stats. I want to draw your attention to a couple things. We think about the future of B2B buying right in that center there. It says over the next 5 years, sellers need to engage with customers differently. And so what's interesting to me is, having been in the sales effectiveness industry now for 30 years, salespeople have always been a source of information. Like, so when customers wanted information, call that salesperson. They talk to me about their product. They talk to me about different solutions or case studies that they bring to their customers, etc. Well, what I say today is, look, if my customer can get that information off my website, then what do they need me for? So just being a source of information is literally not sufficient today to be a seller. What is sufficient is actually taking the data, the overabundance of data, quite frankly, that our customers have at their fingertips, and helping them to make sense of it. I think one of the biggest shifts, if you look on the sense-making seller and that column right there, that second part that says determine the right questions to ask themselves and their suppliers. For years, we've been training salespeople to go off and do discovery. Now, why are they doing discovery? They're trying to learn about their customer's business because they're looking for opportunities to sell something. They're trying to then qualify those opportunities. Is this good business for our organization? And if you think about what I just said, there's very minimal value, if any, to the customer in that process. It's all about looking internally. Can we find an opportunity as a good business for us? The future of selling is to actually help your customers to identify, well, what are the questions that they should be asking? Where do we see opportunities to improve our business? What should we be doing about it? What are the innovative companies out there doing today? How do we make sure that we're at least in the mainstream, if not ahead of the pack? What things should we be paying attention to? It's helping them to identify and answer those questions that leading sellers in the future are going to be doing to really drive their own productivity and growth. Last thing I want to point to on this slide here is that at the bottom, 86% of buyers more likely to purchase when vendors understand their work. That's the future. We've been talking about this for 30 years. How do we focus on the customer's business? How do we make sure sellers don't lead with product, but rather they lead with an understanding? And I believe the future of the top performing sellers isn't just to understand their customers' objectives. Frankly, it's actually help them to shape those objectives. So equipping them with the skills to go in and have those conversations that enable them to do that. So with that, let's do a quick poll here and start to pull the group in, Tony.
Yep.
Thank you, Kim.
So, yeah, just give us what the higher priority is for your sales organization here, and we'll give it a few minutes while you all respond to this. Got about half the people, a little bit more than half the people in so far. All right, we got 2/3 in. Here's one of those.
So boys, you have a little peek into what's going on in the polls. Are you liking what you're seeing, or?
Yeah, we are. So, yeah, so we've got a slight lead with better understanding unique objectives over the need to automate research and administrative work. It's a slight lead, but I think we could probably be satisfied with some of those results. Not so much on more time on client-facing selling activities, and not so much on transitioning to more data-driven selling. If there's another priority in your sales organization, I'd love to either see that in the chat or maybe ask a question about it. And if you have a comment on one of these questions, I'd love to see that there. But not completely unexpected, these results. So if you have any other priorities, just pop it in there, and we'll try to address some of these in a little more detail as we move forward. All right. Yep. Now we can go ahead, Tim.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about the why sales training programs fall short. And we're going to give you 3 reasons for this. I'm going to start with, kind of working through one at a time in terms of why we see sales training programs falling short. Kim, why don't we move forward here? Good. All right. Reason 1. Here's what we hear. Customers have limited options in terms of new sales training content to buy. So click forward for a second, Kim. Let's talk about this. I would tell you, over the last 2 years, our firm, we've spoken with over 200 different companies. I mean, we just constantly, every day, we're on the phone with sales training, sales enablement, sales operations, sales leaders. And almost across the board, look to the left. This is what we hear. So you're telling us and we know everything is changing in terms of how buyers, either enterprise companies or commercial organizations, are buying. So what does that mean? They're saying, oh, we're getting, the Gartner research, 60 to 80% of our way through the buying process before they even want to engage with a salesperson. Because they have so much data available to them, they can make decisions internally and don't need to engage. And then when they're ready, they'll call in the vendors and begin the conversations. Or the research is showing, okay, in enterprise organizations, there's 11 plus people involved in every enterprise decision, a buying decision. And even in SMB, it's 3 plus. And they're saying, buyers don't want to talk with salespeople early in their buying process. Again, because salespeople come in and talk about their product. It's not the time, and they're not interested at that point. So all of these dynamics have been going on for years. Yet when we look at the traditional sales methodologies that are out there, and again, I'll remind you, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know all the major ones that are out there because I've either competed against them or actually represented them. We don't see anything that's new. It's the same companies essentially spouting the same ways of selling that we've heard for years. And it's been a struggle for me to look at that and say, look, it can't be the same. We can't have different expectations from our buyers and then approaching them the same way. So the biggest limit we see is in this market today, there's not a lot of new content. When we think about it, is probably 15 years ago, inside selling came out. So it's been a while. And that, while great, that's not sufficient. So what we're seeing today is a market where there's an inordinate amount of data that our customers are using. So what we'd say, isn't the inverse true? Don't salespeople have that same amount and quality of data that they can use to actually build strategies for their territories, for their accounts, identify opportunities, plan for calls. And so their ability to actually leverage that data, and it's not just about skill and drill training, but it's about how they think. So how do they interpret that data? How do they strategize, and how do they apply it? And how do they work? They have all these platforms and all this available to them. That has changed the way that they actually operate. So we see a tremendous challenge out here, which we'll talk to how to address that a little bit later here in the webinar. But let's move to the next, because I'd like to give you an example of what this looks like.
Ken, I want to just connect. You said something at the beginning, which was, buyers relied on sellers, in the past for information about the products they sold. And the internet and the availability of data has changed that. And the poll questions leaning into our sales reps need to better understand their clients' unique objectives, and the automation of research and administrative work were the top two responses. And there's a correlation between understanding objectives when we've allowed the customer to do all the research. So what we're seeing is a trend as well as sellers responding to the client's self-directed needs rather than going through a discovery process to find them out. And so there's very little value in response to a customer built need. So I wonder, as we think about automating research and understanding client unique objectives, how often our sellers are backing up and making sure that they understand how a client got to those needs in the first place.
That's exactly right. I think that's a great point, Tony. And frankly, I call it in math class, I used to call it show your work.
Right.
You can't just give the answer. How did you get to the answer? And so when clients come out and say, well, we want X, and that's what we called you, the ability of the salesperson to really back them up and and show their work. Help me understand the genesis of this and how you got to these decisions. And frankly, what you might find is you might not agree with their decisions. So there's an opportunity to help them reshape or reframe what they thought was right using your own expertise.
Right. Or if they're giving their needs to 3 or 4 different competitors, what differentiates you at that point? Virtually nothing, except for your response to it.
So here's an example. Let's take a look. Kim, if you could go ahead and click forward. What I'd like to share is what we're hearing from across the board. When I say we talked to over 200 companies, I mean over 200 companies, that every one of them has literally said the exact same thing to us. What you're looking at here on the bottom, it says traditional offering versus emerging. Every one of those companies is using digitalization to rebrand or reframe or redevelop or create new offerings. Everyone's creating new offerings using technology. And these are called emerging offerings versus their traditional. And what they're saying to us is our salespeople are struggling to sell these emerging offerings. Why? Because the emerging offerings require them to go call on new buy points. So there's different use cases with these offerings. So maybe before they didn't have to call on line of business owners, now they do. They may not have had to get all the way up to the C-suite, now they do. They may not have even had to call on IT before, now they do. And so this is requiring them to actually engage differently with their clients. And what you're looking at across the top, that's a buying process. Very general one, but that's what the buyers, our customers, are going through. So Kim, if you click forward here, what we're finding is that the problem our customers would come to us with, they keep saying this, is, look, we're struggling to sell these emerging offerings. And when we look at it with them, the reason they are is they're known for their traditional. So when the customer gets to a point where they have a need, it's like, oh, good, I get to call you and I know I can buy this from you. So their engagement with the client is always late stage. And when you get to that, per what Tony just said, well, I might have made it sound easy, it's hard to actually back them up and reframe what they really want or need. And so what sellers need to do and what we work with our customers on, Kim, is that we actually help them to get in earlier in the process. We've been talking about this now for a quite long time, but if you look at the first 2 stages of that of this process, what we need are sellers who can get in the door and actually help their clients identify the opportunities before they may even exist. This is called emerging demand. So in other words, the customer knows that they have business issues, business opportunities, but frankly, they are struggling with what to do about it. The future of the seller is having conversations many times before there's even any money on the table. And Kim, if you click forward again, please, what you'll see is by getting in early and having these conversations, we can start to identify some of those emerging demand opportunities that are out there and shape the customer's expectations before they get too far into their buying process. Now, this may look simple. This is very hard. And I will tell you that, I'll give you a very specific example. We're working with a Fortune 50 telecom company a ways back, maybe a couple of years ago. And this is when 5G first came into the market, and it created all kinds of new offerings for this telecom company. And we're working with one of their senior sales account managers. And this person had been in their business for 20 years. They've been selling for 30 years, very experienced, high performer. Is calling on this eyeglass manufacturer. And he said, I'm struggling to get them to buy some of our emerging offerings. Even with 5G and everything we have, they just look at us as buying handsets, phones, and data plans. So when we took him through our process and we coached him and helped him to explore that organization, he came back and said, it's incredible. He goes, I've been working with these guys for years. I thought I knew their business. Frankly, I wasn't paying attention to the right things about their business. They're going through significant changes. There are all kinds of opportunities for us to add value to their business that I can see now from the outside looking in, now that I've worked through this process. And frankly, he said, Ken, that company never would have called us for this because they don't think about our organization to help them to solve that. So it's incumbent upon us to equip sellers with the right skills and capabilities to actually get in early and shape. And if you can do this, that's the future of selling right here for your high performers. Kim, let's go ahead and click forward here for a moment. Good. Reason number 2. Well, this one's very near and dear to my heart. Sales training content industry has opposing partnership needs with customers. So click forward here. What do we mean by this? Again, having been in this industry for a long time, this has always been a sore spot for me about how this plays out with sales training providers. Look on the left. Every company that has IP, oh, we own it. You can't change it. Or if you want to change it, you need to hire us to come in. You have to pay us. You can't create derivative works. We have to do it. So what does this mean? It's expensive to customize. It's slow. You've always got to engage the vendor. And if you have internal resources, so you've got sunk costs, these people are sitting around going, okay, well, what did you hire me for if we're using them on the outside? So there's always been this heavy disconnect. And it has really been a challenge for our customers because they struggle with, okay, when do we go buy content? When do we actually build it internally? And frankly, they shouldn't have to worry about that. I mean, let's face it, the content that is built, if it's modern and current, in today's data-driven world, there's no reason to create new content. There should be easy ways to access that content, create your own derivative works, tailor it, personalize it, use it across your organization. That's the future of this industry. So these models that we've had in the past that really limit customers, in the future, no handcuffs. I'll give you one other example. We had a customer come to us and she said, Ken, look, I get a budget every year. Here it is. Okay, month 1, I get the VP coming to me saying, oh, we need negotiating skills. All right, we go out, we find a company that provides us the content, we do a big negotiations program, great. Month 2, next VP comes in, oh, we need messaging. All right, well, we have a lot less budget now, let's go do something on messaging. Maybe we go external, maybe we need to build some of it internal, we're running out of money. Now, month 3, we need prospecting. Every one of the companies we talk to, they have the exact same problem. Does not need to be like that. Should have a library of best-in-class content available for you to use. Again, that's what we see as the future here moving forward. Kim, let's go ahead and move to number 3.
Yeah, got a quick
Oh.
question here.
That's right.
Question.
All right, so we're going to get into some sales technology. And to what extent do you feel that your technology aligns to what you're teaching in your content and your methodology? Quick response here. And while everybody's responding, I'm going to encourage you again to use the Q&A and use the chat session to bring up, what's on your mind from your selling processes and enablement. All right, nobody has answered. Great, it's all tied together. All right.
Well, if it was, I don't think they'd be on the call today.
If you want, what I'd like to know is, just some thoughts on that. Is it, as we go, somewhat seems to be a little bit in the lead behind a little, and not a complete disconnect is what we're seeing. Most of the answers again in the center. I would love to hear from some folks that have a little bit more of a thought besides just answering this question about how well their technology is assisting their sales teams to do their jobs.
Or even the challenge, like what's behind it, like what's causing it to be only somewhat or only a little.
Even if it's just your opinion. All right, I think we're kept out here. So yeah, somewhat is the answer. A little, somewhat, and a little are the popular answers here. It's again not surprising. We're hearing that from our clients, and I think, Ken, you're going to cover a little bit about how sales organizations approach technology and how it can be definitely different.
Oh, that's exactly right. Because the third reason that we see sales training now really struggling is that because you have the sales tech stack, and it's really not optimized for how sellers work. What's their flow of work? And so this is super important because, frankly, when you think about it, you got all these customers we're talking to are saying, look, over the last several years, we're looking for the silver bullet. Everyone is. And they're saying, oh, technology. If we can equip ourselves with more technology, it can help them to do their jobs more effectively. So they're buying all this tech. Now today, when we talk to those same customers, what are they telling us? We've got way too much tech stack. We've got to downsize, number one. Number two, the tech stack we have is not connected together. So these are platforms that are independent and don't actually even talk to each other. That's a problem. But the biggest problem, when we looked at this and as we talked to them, is they're just saying, look, AI, this AI is hot, but if the technology platform was not connected to the seller's workflow in the first place, layering on AI to make it more efficient still doesn't connect it to their workflow. So it's creating an even bigger technology bloat because most of the AI demands that sellers actually have to go do something with it to engage the AI. So therefore, if you look at the bottom under the green, it says, most AI demands the seller have a new set of skills. Prompting. Do we really want to start training our salespeople on how to prompt AI to use it versus actually training them on how to go engage with customers more effectively and understand their business? So the way AI has been consumed here most recently, it's actually causing more of a problem. And that's what we're hearing from our customers. They're struggling with, okay, how do we use this? How do we take this great, very powerful capability and use it to the advantage of our sellers versus just adding more bloat to what we already have?
Yeah, I'd like to encourage some chat on that question. How would you, in a perfect world, how would your organization use AI to improve the sales process? And just take a minute there, see if we can get some comments going before we move on to what we're doing about that. Nobody brave enough? There we go. Scripting. Thank you, Caitlin. To help newer sales agents. When I was a young seller, which was a long time ago, I learned by being in front of clients, and I had a sales manager that offered me the opportunity to fail. So we would go on sales calls and he would just watch me, completely botch it. But I learned so much from that failure. And I realized at that point that the best place to learn is when we're actually talking to clients about their needs. CRM to help next steps. Thank you, Maggie. So that's really about what to do next as you think about what to sell and how to sell it. Summary of research available. Right. Eric, thank you for that. If the buyers can do the research, so can the sellers, right? Right. Ken, those
I
are
think the
three
AI,
really good inputs there. Really appreciate it. Maybe we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. So like, I want to say like, okay, so if these are three challenges, call recording from Chris, yeah, for review and for coaching, excellent. Again, a lot of good different, what I'll call niche applications. And that's what we're hearing from our clients. These are great, but what we really need is to enable our sellers with an automated approach to AI, an automated approach to work. And so what are we doing different about all this, about each of these three reasons? Maybe, Kim, let's go ahead and click forward and let's jump into what are we doing about it? So let me go ahead and give you just a high level. Here at GP, I'm going to point you to the very first column there. What we're doing is we're bringing a proven workflow, a sales methodology. Now, this is content all the way from, hey, I've got a list of accounts, or I've got a territory of accounts. What's my workflow all the way through? All right, I've just closed a deal. What exactly are the things that I need to do? How do I do it? Developing the skills, the capabilities, the thinking, all that is baked in here. Now, you take this is the library of content I talked about earlier, making this available to our customers. You can engage your sales organization at any point in that process. But the key here is it's unlimited. It allows you to take this content, personalize it, customize it, and drive it through your organization for adoption. This is a start point, but the key word in there is words are workflow driven. This is what has been missing for the longest time. A lot of training out there, but it's not embedded into how sellers operate day to day. Now we've taken that and now we've embedded the tools and that workflow right into the CRM. It's deeply embedded. So when a seller goes into the CRM, they can engage with the content, the exact content that they just got trained on, the exact tools, and it guides them. It's called guided selling. That's the name of the application, right through their process. Again, depending on where they want to start at the territory level, all the way down to call planning. Now consider this layer on top, automating those workflows. So now we have the workflow, which is the golden thread. This is what a seller needs to be doing every day, every week, every month. And that's what we've built. So because we have that workflow, we can now automate that. And we have inside the CRM feeding information to sellers. So where we're finding that they really struggle is, look, there's all this data available to us too, just like our clients. How do we use it? So we do the data gathering, the data interpretation, which they really struggle with. That's what we keep hearing from our clients. Like, how do they interpret the data? And we actually feed them. How do you actually use this to create, where are the new opportunities inside your accounts? How do you pursue those opportunities from a deal pursuit standpoint? Who do you call on? All the way to what's that meeting or conversation even sound like? All this is completely automated for them. So ultimately their focus today and moving forward is all on execution. This unlocks the opportunity to drive significant growth for your organization because we've essentially removed all of those workflows that are administrative. That's number one. But number two, we've built this as if a high performer was finding the data, was interpreting the data, and was applying the data. So now imagine using the automation to actually replicate what high performers would do, which are usually only a couple % of your entire sales team. Now you can do that at scale. Everyone's getting great data, telling them and guiding them on exactly how they need to operate. So this is what we've built, and Tony's going to take us to another level of detail here in terms of explaining some of this. Go ahead, Tony.
Yep. So Kim, if you can advance, what I want to do is get a dialogue about what this looks like in your organization. I've grabbed a view of what we've done in another organization. This is their view, but you'll have your own because it's your sales process, it's your training program, it's your product or service. Nobody sells it the same way that you do. And so, if we think about our sales process as a persona in itself, then it should be customized exactly for the way your top performers execute on it. So Ken talked about a lot of the automation. So in that green box, we're going to talk about automating a workflow. And, LinkedIn and Google, and before LinkedIn got really sophisticated with insights and some other things that they've come out with, we used to have Google alerts and would say, hey, I want to call on Boeing. So tell me every time something pops up for Boeing. All right. And that was the start of it. But there's an infinite amount of unique information about our target companies and our target prospects, people, that is available. And we can start using an automated workflow to create those ideal client profiles, to create the people we want to call on and the companies we want to call in. And so we can, and now if you layer that with the way your business is using AI to run itself, I'll use an example of an insurance company. If the underwriting team is building a risk analyzer or some other tool that says these types of companies are more likely to do business with us, you can take that data, marry it with the AI information we're getting on the prospect, and really come up with what's next in the workflow, which is a hypothesis. How are we going to sell this person at this company? Now, Ken mentioned it earlier. Gartner's research is showing that we're growing from 3 to 8 to now, I think the number is an average of 11 decision makers for complex sales. So that hypothesis and that roadmap, and summary of research available on Buyer. I'm looking back into the chat. Sales scripting to help newer agents. All of this done in an automated workflow. So what we're going to tell our engines is who and what. We're going to combine it with our company data and create a hypothesis and a roadmap for how we're going to execute conversations. And so now we still need the human side of this. We still need top performing sellers to know how to execute a consultative conversation, but they're going to come into that conversation with an enormous amount of information about the person they're talking to and the challenges their company is having. So, so theoretically, if the client can get 2/3 of the way, so can we. We can get ourselves to that point. And Ken was talking about backing up. We will be, in that case, offering our sellers better questions to challenge the client on things they haven't considered. And one of the definitions of creating value is helping a client see needs they didn't know they had. And so as we execute that automated process, we bring them into the human relation, which is that customer focused conversation. And then as we build opportunities into the pipeline, we use other skills like storytelling and deal strategies and negotiations to help close them at a higher rate. Now in this particular view, we've got leadership at the bottom. Now, the leadership part and the coaching occurs all the way through. So you want a good coach or a mentor to talk about your hypotheses and your roadmaps to make sure that they make sense, that they pass the eye test as the AI starts to drive those for us in an automated fashion. But we still want a human to look at it and say, yeah, that looks right, and I can execute on that. And then obviously, good conversations need to be heard. I like the recording calls to review for coaching, because that's where you'll be able to hear what the client said, how your seller responded, and what your seller said and how your client responded, and then use some AI and some across the transcript to start looking in your call transcripts for common things that AI can pick up on that had positive results in sales calls. So it's wrapping the human seller with all of these tools in a thoughtful way, but really at the beginning, starting with your client environment or your company environment and your products and services. So I'm going to pause there for a second and just see what everybody thinks about how that might look in your organization. Sales executives more strategic. What do we think that means? Ken, I have a thought on that. I'm pretty sure you do too. So I'll defer to you for first response on that from Chris.
Sure. Yeah, I'm assuming, Chris, you mean your own internal sales executives when they're brought into a conversation, so a C-suite conversation with the customer. Is that fair? I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Correct. Got it. Look. Yes, this is the same thing. So if we go back to what I showed you earlier, and we showed you that buying process, and said, well, all our customers keep saying we need to get in earlier ahead of the buying cycle on those first two kind of steps in the buying process. What Tony's showing you here in the top right, all the way from industry and market through account down to opportunity, this is the flow that enables sellers to show up with a hypothesis. They can use that hypothesis, number one, now to get the meeting. Because why would somebody who normally wouldn't meet with your salesperson or sales executive even take a meeting with them if they're not a traditional call point? So we need to have something that actually brings them in to say, yes, I want to meet with them. Then we show up and we have a hypothesis or more that we're sharing about their business, what's happening with them. Back to the original poll, you all said we need our people to be more focused on our accounts and our customers. There's that. We're showing up with this, leading with this. So to us, this is the modern day version of Insight. This is the modern day of making sure it's connected to your customer's business. And so to answer your question, Chris, this same information is also then used by our customers to essentially prepare for these conversations. Like we have customers who are then taking this data, and when they go and they plan out what they call the conversation roadmap internally, they say, okay, at this point, we need to engage our sales executive. By the way, now the sales executive can see that exact same information to say, here's what's happening inside this company. Here's where we see the opportunity, the hypothesis. And now here's our exact call plan for how we're going to either validate that hypothesis or identify whether or not there's other hypotheses we're not aware of. But it's a great start point for the conversation. So frankly, this becomes the way to engage internally with resources, executive or overlay sellers, to ensure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. And, as I think about that question, especially in the context of this discussion here, there's a lot of sellers out there who are responding directly to client needs and not adding any value. So they're being less strategic, even though it might be a more qualified opportunity. If a client has researched your company, decided that you might have something that they want to buy from you and call you, you think that's a great lead, but there's really no strategic conversation there. And you create value as a seller when you help your clients understand things that they need that they didn't know they did, when you help them find opportunities they didn't realize they had, and when you present a solution that maybe they weren't expected. So, and you think about all of your individual products and services that all of you are marketing in the world today, they solve problems. And when we get clients coming in looking for our solutions, we forget about which problems they're trying to solve. And I think that's where your more strategic conversation is the seller willing to take what they know about you and help you solve the KPIs that your company has said you want to achieve. And if we just, in Ken and I's case, if we just said, here's, you want sales training, here's the sales training, I mean, there's no value there. There's not a strategic conversation. The question is, why do you need sales training and why do you need it now? What are you trying to, and that's where a strategic conversation fueled by your seller with strong hypotheses with the right people, they'll feel more comfortable in the ambiguity of those questions. Well, why do you need this? Because too many sellers are worried that conversation will steer them away from features and benefits, which is all they know how to talk about. So there's a lot of coaching in here that needs to happen with people that have gone through those ambiguous conversations and come out on the other side with a very strategic relationship because they were the thought leader. All right, there's one more. All right, so Ken, what do you mean by hypothesis and how do you form those?
What we say, if simply said, Chris, from the outside looking in, when we look at the changes that an organization is going through, and we consider what needs to happen to drive that change, and then we consider what can our organization do to help drive that change, accelerate it, help them to be successful in that. That's what we use to form hypotheses, which are what I think of these as pre-funnel opportunities. So as I go in to talk with a client, I have this, we use these hypotheses to essentially lead the conversation. So the days of showing up and saying, well, let me just go and ask a bunch of questions, do discovery so I can figure out where the opportunities lie. You got too many buyers out there saying, look, I could spend all day meeting with salespeople and educating them on our business. I wouldn't get my day job done. So sellers are needing to show up with a perspective. And again, that's what we call these hypotheses. This generates the conversation, but it's based on the data about the customer's business. We don't just form them. It's based on the data of their business, mirroring that with our experiences and expertise.
And I'll give you an example there, Chris. I had a client, an aerospace client that had a very specific profile for their sellers. They had to come with certain background. They had come with certain parts on their resume, and they had to have certain set of contacts. And they came to me and said, we need sales training for them. And okay, all right, we could train that specific person, and no problem. We're going to teach them how to do these things. But I got with a partner, and as we started to explore, what are they, why do they need that? And we started to look through the hypothesis of what their goals were for those people. What we settled on was they don't really need sales training. They need a better talent profile. And so we created a hypothesis that maybe instead of sales training is what they asked for, maybe we should ask them some questions about how they profile the talent and what that looks like. And, long story short, they ended up buying the talent profile, not the sales training. So with your leadership and your frontline sales coaches, mentors, managers, you look at those hypotheses that frankly, the data is driving. The data set is telling us, this client is likely to buy this, but you still need somebody to come up with the right question that gets a client thinking, I hadn't thought about it that way. So that's a real live example of where a hypothesis turned into a sale. And, I think it really created value for that particular client. All right, any other comments or questions on this? I'm going to switch gears here in the last few minutes just to talk about the learning and development side very quickly and some of the things that we're seeing. So if you want to talk about this particular strategy, drop it in quick or put a Q&A to us later. Happy to continue this conversation. All right, so from a learning and development side, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these specific words that are in these slides, but in order to get to scale, we need to have a self-paced situation. We need our sellers to be able to get out there, get to asynchronous learning for the big chunks of concepts, so that we can get to coaching them in their client-facing situations as quickly as possible. Those fundamentals and basics. It's really hard to scale if we're bringing people in the classroom for everything. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be bringing them into the classroom. In a minute here, I'm going to talk about the importance of that. But for the really large chunks of conceptual selling concepts, we need, in order to scale globally and scale big and fast, we need to put it in the learner's hands. Go ahead and switch, Kim. All right, another fundamental of that is to make it yours. All right, and Ken talked about contextualization. Ken and I have spent years selling sales IP, and yeah, we built custom role plays, and we changed seller to producer, or we changed manager to leader, and put it in context. I want you to think about making it even more yours. I want the seller, as they're going through your learning, to feel like you built it for them, not anybody else. All right, your learning and development teams and your marketing teams have worked really hard to create a visual brand, accessible content, updated every single year. As you go to, I had a conversation with a client yesterday about regulatory information every year being updated into their learning programs. Your sales go-to-market changes slightly every year. Your learning should be able to adapt with that. Next slide, Kim. Your in-person and virtual learning experiences, again, branded, adapted, and updated with the most relevant, most ruthlessly relevant information and update and current information as possible. And I think most organizations understand this, but executing that, it goes all the way back to what Ken said in reason number 2, that making a quick pivot in your learning we need to set the bar higher and with being able to change these experiences in real time. Next, Kim. And then don't forget about this part. Administrating, getting people in efficiently, cost effectively to handle everything from communications with the learner and inviting them into an experience to however we're executing that, whether it's online or in person or virtually, and then being able to handle with any logistics, any follow-up materials, and then any measurement or surveys that we might have after. Next one's Kim, please. And then all of us who have sold can remember somebody that taught them how to train, how to sell. And training delivery is, especially in the sales community, is really critical. It comes with a variety of different pieces to it. Some organizations keep their training delivery in-house for a lot of really good reasons. One is that community where you know your environment, you know your sellers, it's custom. And so as you think about being able to scale, there are opportunities to create that learning community with facilitators that know you, that don't necessarily work for you. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. And then finally, Kim, next slide, probably the most important thing, because sales data is readily available. So our lagging indicators, revenue generation, profits, call the demo to close, anything that you might be training from a sales perspective is easily captured, mostly through some sort of integration with our CRM. And, the learning community has struggled to keep up with the leading indicators. When we're doing a soft skills program, how do we measure the leading indicators? And with AI and with tools like Chris said, recording, we can start to get to some of those leading indicators and create the dashboards that show which of our sales skills has the most impact on success with our clients. And so we've got a way to build this from KPIs backwards into our learning environment so that we know what we're going to measure, how we're going to measure it, who we're measuring it for, because we'll report to salespeople differently than we'll report to their managers, differently than we'll report to their executives. But executives do want to know that an investment in sales training is moving that needle a little bit. So don't forget about this part, and we can certainly help you put all this together. I think that takes us to our formal Q&A, doesn't it, Kim?
Yes.
I think it does.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know if you said Ken or Kim. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I do. I just wanted, before we jump into Q&A, just a quick recap to say, what Tony and I just talked through, if you think about it, what GP is really bringing now to market is this incredible library of modern content linked to technology and guided selling and application that essentially ties back to the content, and a broad array of services, whether it's delivery, whether it's measurement, administration. So as you think about your own business, the opportunity here is, again, you have an organization that can support anyone here globally. But the other thing is flexibly. We're here to help our customers, because it's the one thing I've heard over the last 30 years, and we continue to hear every conversation we have. We need a partner who's flexible, who doesn't just say, oh, there's one way to do it, or we won't do that. No, this is about us working with you and essentially becoming a part of your team. That's how we see this here at GP. That said, let's jump to the Q&A. Any questions for us?
Okay. Well, first of all, great job, gentlemen. So I even learned a thing or two. It's hard to do sometimes.
I know we didn't answer all the questions.
Now I have some questions for you that have come in. So I have a question about what are the most common challenges that you are seeing salespeople facing today, and how does that affect the training strategy to support them? And can I add on adoption as well? I've always that getting salespeople adopted to new technologies is sometimes a little difficult as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest challenges I see, at least, again, is, and we talked about this, they have this abundance of new offerings that their companies are bringing to market and the ability of the sellers to actually contextualize those offerings for their customers, because they're just not things that they've sold before. So their ability to actually say, okay, how do these new offerings that we're bringing to market actually bring value to our customers? Who are the exact customers or call points that we even need to be going to? So they struggle just almost at the beginning of that buy sell process. So we see a lot of opportunity there. And again, because of the wonderfulness of what we're doing around automation, we're enabling them, we're starting to feed them some of that exact information and guide them on those opportunities. Now the implication for training, of course, is if we're doing that for them, then we can kind of like cross that off the training list. Because now we can put our attention to, let's make sure we're equipping them with the skills to go execute. So it really should affect your training strategy.
Yeah, I think there's a real challenge in holding on to the influencing skills, the ability to have a conversation, and go to places that it may or may not lead to a sale for you, but has value for the client. In the technology driven world that we are, all of that information is great, but there is a risk of falling into that shiny object syndrome where we think the technology's going to do it for us, and we need to remember that people buy from people, and that's still fundamentally true.
Okay, great. A couple more questions. I want to be conscious of time and how much time we have left, but there's a question here on how do you work with companies who are redefining their go-to-market and enablement functions?
So how we work with them on the go-to-market, I mean, I'd say we're not a go-to-market designer type organization in terms of defining that. What we are is, okay, once you have your go-to-market defined, what we're finding ourselves doing a lot of these days, which is really interesting, is really defining the selling process. So helping companies to really start to say, okay, in this new data-driven world, what exactly is the process that our sellers should follow? By the way, it's not linear. What are those verifiable outcomes by step? What are the key actions our sellers need to take to be successful? So really enabling them on the front end, because once we define that, then that workflow that Tony showed you and that content easily gets plugged in, and it's all contextualized for our customers.
And then from a learning standpoint, a learning and development standpoint, we want to put that workflow in their way, in the way they do their work. So we want to pull the research in as they normally would. We want to help them learn in all 5 moments of need, when they learn something new, when they need to build on that learning, when something changes. And it needs to happen in the course of their regular workday. So, we all know the learning professionals on this call know how hard it is to get people to come willingly to a learning event. They, especially salespeople, because they're always complaining about field time. Well, we all know that the field time really isn't there anymore. So we have these opportunities in the course of the day, put learning opportunities in front of them that are wrapped around the things that we've been talking about today.
Okay, good. I have a final question here. What are the key areas you see AI supporting sellers in the sales workflow?
Can you repeat that at the end, Kim, please?
Yeah, so what are the key areas you see AI supporting sellers in the sales workflow?
Got it. I see it. We see a seller workflow using AI that automates. All right, I've got 10 accounts, 100 accounts, 1,000 accounts. It really doesn't matter, because with AI now, I can keep tabs on every single one of those accounts on a regular basis. Tony talked about having little things pop up over these little widgets, if you will, or little applications that would give you information. Automated that entire process. So as a seller, it just basically tells me something has changed in this account. Here was the change. Here's the implication of that change. So therefore, here's a new hypothesis, and here's how you should go pursue that. So think about doing this at scale. Sales has been limited. Growth and go-to-market has been limited by how many sellers we actually have, how many humans we have, and we could never take advantage of the full market. Well, today with AI, we'll be able to cover the entire market at scale and do it better than we would even with more humans. So that's how we see the future.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ken, 100%. As an individual contributor, I always wanted to be with clients more often. And if I could help a seller fill their calendar with client conversations, they're going to see an improved result. So that's one place I think AI can be really helpful, is helping clients helping sellers fill their calendar with qualified people, warm prospects. The other side of it is, and it goes to Chris, that ability using AI to see how I performed in the moment is going to be really valuable, because I can get to my coaching quicker. I can get to my mentor quicker. Recording an AI has the ability to, when a sales manager, when I was managing a bunch of sellers at a previous firm, I would say, hey, how did it go? And they would tell me on a sales call, went, well, that was up for their interpretation, and it was probably 60% accurate. But with AI and all of the tools in front of us, we can be more helpful to the sellers in the moment they need to be at their best.
Well, we are at time, gentlemen. I do have the questions that have come in that haven't been answered, I'll make sure that we get them to Tony and Ken, and we can do a follow-up on those, getting your questions answered. There was a comment to say that that they hear customers say that they appreciate, and this goes to what you were just saying, Tony, the meeting isn't centered around PowerPoint. It's tough to share ideas without the PowerPoint, but again, the interaction is face-to-face. Talking about it without that is important.
I dare you to show up to a sales call without one. You might be quite pleased with the results.
Great. You guys, you did a wonderful job. And not only did you do a wonderful job, everybody who was on here, I thank you for your time and your attention. And as always, be sure to check out gpstrategies.com/webinars for all of our upcoming webinars, and hope to see you at another upcoming webinar. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much, and everybody have a wonderful and productive rest of your day.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.